All right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. We are here tonight to talk about the proposed 2021 to 2024 roads and non-motorized millage. We have a brief agenda. Certainly start off with welcoming you to the meeting. We'll give you a little bit of background information on the existing road and non-motorized millage, talk about the proposed millage, and then certainly happy to answer any questions that you may have. For today's speakers, I'm Cheryl Soder-Homsiddle. I'm the Managing Director of the Washtenaw County Road Commission. And with me tonight is Roy Townsend, Project Manager for the Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation Commission. As far as a little bit of background information, our story really starts back in 2014. At that point in time, the county roads, actually most of the roads within the county, were certainly in dire condition. And that represented decades of underinvestment at both the national and state level. We had more than 200 miles of primary roads that were rated in poor or failing condition. I think that a prime example of that was North Territorial Road going through Northfield Township. And certainly our residents wanted better roads and pathways. So the first thing that we started doing from the Road Commission's perspective was exploring funding opportunities. The Road Commission itself does not have taxing authority. So working with the County Board of Commissioners, they first formed a roads funding subcommittee. And working with that group, ultimately, the County Board ended up approving under Public Act 283 for 2 consecutive years, that ended up being for 2015 and 2016, a 1/2 mil millage that was imposed upon the voters. That raised roughly $7.3 million each year. But for those 2 years, we were able to complete 117 road projects and over 160 miles of roadway improved. Here's a good example of the type of road work that we were doing. Parker Road over, it's a borderline road between Lima and Scio Townships. And while Public Act 283 was certainly one mechanism and worked well for those 2 years, working with the county board, they really felt that they wanted something a little better. First of all, they were looking for something that would be voter approved. They were looking for something that was longer term. They wanted the ability to do some planning. With some of our smaller communities, what we've been attempting to do with each of the millages is to give back into the communities the amount that's generated within those communities. Some of our communities are smaller, and so by having a longer term millage, we have the ability to collect over a period of time the funds that are raised, and we can do a bigger scale project as opposed to attempting to do smaller projects on a year-by-year basis. It also allows us to potentially partner these funds with other funding or other projects that may be in the area when we have a longer term plan of what's going on. So ultimately, working again with that roads funding subcommittee, what we came up with was a proposed 4-year millage. It would remain at the 1/2 mil level. One thing that was important to the county board was the non-motorized component. So they requested that 20% of the millage go towards non-motorized projects. And that a specific plan be put in place. So as part of explaining the millage, we did put together a 4-year plan. We worked with the different cities and villages within Washtenaw County, as well as county parks, so that we could demonstrate to the voters and have that accountability as to what exactly would be done should this millage be approved. So that all took place in the fall of 2016, and we're very pleased to say that in November 2016, 71% of the voters in Washtenaw County did approve the original millage, and that resulted in 137 out of 141 precincts which voted yes. So what does that 1/2 mil look like under the existing millage? Again, that generates roughly $7.3 million each year. Of that, Washtenaw County Road Commission receives $3.3 million on behalf of the townships, since we have jurisdiction over the roads. Cities and villages receive back collectively $2.5 million each year. That goes back to the cities and villages in the manner in which it was received. And then the 20% Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation does receive that for the non-motorized component, and currently that's approximately $1.5 million each year. So what have we done so far? We've completed 3 full years of the millage, and we've been able to complete over 110 road projects, resulting in over 170 miles of roadway improved, and 14 non-motorized projects that have been completed in cooperation with county parks. And again, that's for 3 years, and we are currently working in the 4th year of this millage. And we have worked very hard as we were selecting projects at applying asset management principles wherever we could, trying to keep our good and fair roads in good or fair condition, and reducing the number of poor roads that we had throughout the county. And I think that these graphs, which show the pavement conditions, demonstrate that we've been able to do that with some success. Here is a map of the projects over the 4-year period that we've been able to, again, complete. We're very proud of that. And here's some pictures showing the types of work that was completed. Here's a good example, again, of what we would call a crush and shape, where we pulverize the existing roadway and then pave over it. This is on Saline-Milan Rd down in York Township. Again, a similar type project with additional curb and gutter and some non-motorized improvements. This is MacArthur Boulevard over in Superior Township. And half of our road system still is gravel. And so we can't neglect those as we're looking at our millage projects. And so here's a prime example of what Lima Center Road we were able to complete. Again, that's a borderline road between Lima and with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Roy, and he can explain what the county parks has been able to accomplish as well.
Yeah, so when the Board of County Commissioners approved the millage to put on the ballot, they were the one that justified or wanted to put 20% towards non-motorized. And one of the initiatives they really want to push is the border trail, which is basically a non-motorized trail that would connect Wayne County to Ypsilanti, to Ann Arbor, to Dexter, to Chelsea, eventually to Stockbridge. So it's a prime non-motorized trail through the county. It's approximately 50 miles, and county parks started looking at this about 20 plus years ago. Some of the sections were built in the city of Ann Arbor, like Gallup Park, nearly 30 plus years ago. But we really wanted to connect the communities like Dexter and Ypsilanti and makes one unified trail system. So with the 20% of that $1.5 million, $1 million a year goes towards the border to border. And with that, we're able to leverage federal funds and state funds and a lot of private dollars. So end of the day, the numbers that what I recall is basically the $1.5 or the $1 million, $4 million, we end up leveraging about $12 million in private, state, and federal funds to make those funds go as far as possible. And this is the project that we're doing from Chelsea to Stockbridge. We did 2 miles 2 years ago, opened in 2018. We're about ready to open another 2.5 miles from basically what we call Green Lake Campground all the way up to North Territorial, which will include a tunnel, some boardwalks, a trailhead at Linden Township, and it'll end up being like 5.5 miles of paved trail along M52 winding through state land, which is a lot of recreation areas, Waterloo and Pinckney recreation areas. So Cheryl, if you want to go ahead to the next slide, please. Also, it's always been a push to connect Dexter to Ann Arbor. Huron River Drive in that section is considered probably one of the most scenic roads in Washtenaw County, and a lot of cyclists use that on any given Saturday. The option of the trail is trying to connect all the metro parks, which we did some of the sections, Hudson Mills to the city of Dexter 5+ years ago. We also connected Dexter Huron to Dexter about 7 years ago. So now we're working on connecting Dexter Huron to Delhi, and then Delhi to the city of Ann Arbor. This is a segment that we completed this spring. This is a 210-foot long bridge crossing the Huron River that we put in 2 bridges to connect, like I said, Dexter Huron to Zeeb Road, about 2.5 miles. Very expensive project because there's 2 bridges, about $4.5 million. But we were able to also leverage about $3 to $4 million in federal funds and state funds. So our $1 million went a long ways. So our goal is, like I said, connect all the way into the city of Ann Arbor. And this is one segment. We're here again. We're probably doing another segment next year, which will get us from Zeeb to Delhi. and keep marching forward all the way into the city of Ann Arbor. And with the border money coming from the millage, the plan that was probably 20 years to connect all these, we're hoping to shorten that probably in the 5 to 10 year range. So go ahead, Cheryl. And this just shows the map. Like I said, if you start in Stockbridge, obviously Stockbridge is outside the county. So we can start the county line at Jackson and Washtenaw and come down 52 along 52, the segment in green. That hopefully we'll do that next year, if not all of it, at least partial of it. This year from North Territorial will be done probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then into Chelsea, we just picked an alignment going from Chelsea, the roundabout at Workner into Chelsea. Then we'll go through Chelsea. We built 2 miles last year along Dexter, Chelsea, hoping to build about another 1.5 miles next year, get to Dexter eventually, then through Dexter to Ann Arbor. The different segments I already talked about briefly. We're also doing work in Ypsilanti City this year on 2 projects and also 2 segments in Ypsilanti Township. Our goal actually this summer, probably September, we'll finally reach our first border, Wayne County, and we will have a segment of trail that will go from Wayne County through Ypsilanti Township, through the city of Ypsilanti to Ann Arbor. So that'll actually be done. So it's good that we can have that. Also, if you look at the northern part of the county where the trail goes up along Dexter Pinckney through Hudson Mills, our goal ultimately is have a trail that goes from Hudson Mills up to Pinckney along the Lakelands Trail. That's a trail that goes along Pinckney to Hamburg and Pinckney to Stockbridge, and the trail that goes to Stockbridge to Jackson. And that was just completed last year. So this is a trail, but eventually will connect a lot of communities. Ultimately, the goal is going from the B2B will be part of what we call the Iron Bell Trail, which will go from Iron Mountain to Belle Isle in the city of Detroit, with it going through Washtenaw County. So I think that's a little brief summary of trails in Washtenaw County. So go ahead, Cheryl.
All right. Well, thank you, Roy. So that's a lot of information about what we've been able to accomplish with the existing millage. So we started thinking about, as like I said, we're in year 4. First question we asked ourselves was, well, do we need to continue this millage? We've been able to accomplish a lot of good work. Are we done? If you remember back in 2015, the Michigan legislature did approve a transportation package. So we have seen an increase in the gasoline tax as well as the vehicle registration fees. So funding has improved on the state level. So do we need this millage to continue? But as we started to ask ourselves that question, we took a look at our primary road, paved road system. And we said, if we were to try to get all of our paved primary roads into good condition today, we still are looking at a price tag of in excess of $52 million. We have dug ourselves a really big hole with those decades of underinvestment. In addition, the transportation package that was passed back in 2015, half of that is slated to come from the Michigan General Fund. Fortunately, with this pandemic situation, I think we're all aware of the various pressures that are on the Michigan General Fund right now, and whether or not they will continue to fund transportation as originally intended back in 2015 remains to be unseen. So between those 2 events, we felt strongly that yes, there still is a need to continue with the county millage. So again, working with the Roads Funding Subcommittee, we explored different options and ultimately came to the conclusion that renewing the existing road and non-motorized millage made the most sense. People seemed to be at least somewhat comfortable with, and the 1/2 mil, while we certainly could justify doing a lot more, it was an amount that made sense. Again, feel comfortable that as a community that the dedication of the 20% to non-motorized also continues to make sense. So we were looking at renewal of that existing millage. One thing that was important is that that amount has decreased with the Headley Amendment. So we're also asking voters to restore or basically hit that reset button so that it goes back to being the full 1/2 mil. And what that would do, that would ultimately raise approximately $8.9 million each year should this millage be approved. So again, working with that roads funding subcommittee, we're very pleased to share that the county board in April did pass a resolution and agreed to put it on the August 4th, 2020 ballot for approval by the voters. So previously I showed you a slide of what 1/2 mil generates under the existing millage. Should this millage be approved, again, that would generate approximately $8.9 million each year. Of that, Washtenaw County Road Commission would now receive $4 million to go towards the county road system. Cities and villages collectively would receive $3.1 million, and Washtenaw County Parks for the 20% non-motorized would now receive $1.8 million each year. And so that would result in approximately 215 miles of roadway being improved over that 4-year period, and over 10 pathway projects being completed with that dedication towards the non-motorized. Similar to what we did 4 years ago, we have put a plan together, again, working with the different cities and villages as well as county parks, so that we can explain where the funds would be going should the millage be passed. From the Road Commission's perspective, we have a variety of work that we would be doing. Again, using those asset management principles, we're really trying to continue to maintain the existing system that we have. So you see a lot of chip seal and some mill and overlay work. And that results in about 218 miles of roadway on the county system being improved, as well as 3 intersection projects that would be completed. And that results in approximately almost $18 million of work being completed over that 4-year period. Again, cities and villages would collectively receive approximately $3.1 million each year. That would go back to them in the manner in which it was raised. The city of Ann Arbor, being the largest city, would receive approximately $2.4 million each year. And again, cities and villages do pick their own road and non-motorized projects. So Roy, if you'd like to share what county parks would do on the non-motorized side, that would be
sure. Great. Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, so some of the pathway projects, like I mentioned, some of it will be continuing stuff in Dexter, Chelsea, along that route, also Chelsea up to Stockbridge, north of North Territorial, and also segments along the Huron River. That's really going to be a focus, getting from Dexter to Ann Arbor, and also completing some of the work through in Ypsilanti City. There's still some work to be done there, mainly around Eastern Michigan University, all the way over to St. Joe. We also offer a program called Connecting Communities Grants, which of the nearly $1.8 million a year, about $500,000 to $600,000 a year goes to Connecting Community Grants. And if I recall, over half the townships have collected money on these Connecting Communities. I know Northfield, Manchester, Pittsfield, Superior, Ann Arbor, Scio, Ypsilanti, York, maybe even Augusta. So a lot of the townships, Dexter, have, in these Connecting Community Grants, what we're trying to do with that is the pathway is really focused on the border to border, which we consider the spine of the system. And the Connecting Communities is an opportunity to connect either, something to a park or something to a school. And it's just opportunities to connect, communities. And some of them actually will connect to the border to border trail. That's happening in Scio, that's happening in Superior. And I know Pittsfield's connected a lot of their subdivisions, some of the subdivision developments put pathways across their frontage. So over time there, fill those gaps. So that's what that's really all about. Also, money in the Connecting Communities is for planning, because sometimes townships get started. It's like, boy, we'd like to get in to do this, but they're not even sure where to start. So we have money set aside for planning. So you say, what would be the greatest need in your township? So we can, have money set aside for that and start planning. Then you could say, okay, this is the greatest need. We've been doing that out in Manchester for a while. We're trying to get from Village of Manchester out to Watkins Lake State Park, trying to figure that out. So we've done some money for planning, and now we're getting closer to construction grants. So that's what they're Connecting Community Grants. And same thing, I know other communities have then used that to leverage state and federal. Ann Arbor's done that, Pittsfield's done that, Scio's done that. Leverage those Connecting Communities dollars to leverage other federal and other grants. So at the end of the day, helped us leverage over $13 million in non-motorized projects across the county. Like I said, with the border being sort of like the spine of the system, these extra connecting communities are also being used. And also during this pandemic, we've seen the numbers of people on the trails, not only in border, but all the other communities, just shoot through the roof as people are getting out, using these trails, walking, riding, and all kinds of. So I think that's going to continue. People like sort of finding trails that didn't even know existed, and taking advantage of it. So we'll continue to connect the system. I think the goal is hopefully the next 5 years, 10 years, have a whole complete system connected together, so that communities will be connected. And then what would probably continue is, extend those spines, extend out to other communities, to the north, to the south, get a better way to get Saline connected, get, other townships connected. So that's the goal of the non-motorized at 20%. And that's why, we're hoping another 4 years if it passes, we can keep it moving forward. So thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks, Roy. So one frequent question that we get is, how much is it going to cost me? And for the average taxpayer, assuming that they have a home with a taxable value of $100,000, and that's the taxable value, it would be approximately $50 each year that would be going towards the road and non-motorized millage. So when you take a look at that compared to some of the other things that we're paying and how much we utilize both the roads and non-motorized systems in Washtenaw County, hopefully people feel that that is a good investment. We do have quite a bit of information that is available on our website. That includes, we have an interactive project map where if you hover over any of the links on the map, it gives you more information on what exactly that project is, the type of work that would be completed, the beginning and the end points. For those that like lists as opposed to maps, we have detailed project lists for county projects, for city and village projects, for the non-motorized projects. And we also have a list of frequently asked questions and answers, so that hopefully we're taking care of any of the questions that may arise there. So with that, I'd be happy to hand it over to Emily as far as any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Cheryl. So as we mentioned at the start of the meeting, we are now going to open it up to Q&A. And so if you are viewing the meeting on your computer and you want to participate, first make sure to click Join Audio, and then you can raise your hand by clicking the Participants button at the bottom of your screen and the Raise Hand button at the bottom right of your screen. If you dialed into the meeting from your touch-tone phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. As the meeting host, I will unmute participants with raised hands one at a time, and I will announce your username or the last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. We're happy to answer as many questions as possible, but please be respectful of each other's times. If your question is answered before you're called on, you can lower your hand by clicking the lower hand button or by dialing *9. You can also ask us a question through the chat, and you can find the chat feature at the bottom of your screen again, and you can, it might be under the More button, and you can chat and ask us a question that we'd be happy to address. Is there anybody at this time that would like to virtually raise their hand or ask a question in chat about the roads and non-motorized millage? Oh, I do see a raised hand. Let's see, I'm going to unmute you, Christian. Go ahead.
Hi, yes, sorry, I'm eating dinner as well. I was just curious about the money going to the Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation for the non-motorized pathways. Why was the decision made for that money for non-motorized pathways to go there versus using non-motorized pathways integrated into our current motorized system? Does that make sense?
So I think you're asking why build additional pathways outside of the road right-of-way instead of building non-motorized facilities alongside our roadway system that already exists. Is that a correct summary? Okay. Cheryl or Roy, do you want to? I
can start and then Cheryl can add in. Well, the county parks, there's always been this goal for 20 years or plus to try to complete the border trail network. So that's when the Board of Commissioners said they wanted it going to county parks. that's always been our goal, to try to finish that up. Within the cities, I know the city of Ann Arbor and I think the city of Ypsilanti, they are putting some of their money, this millage money, in on road systems, on the road systems itself. And I think, so that's sort of decision each community can make. But obviously Parks doesn't really have any roads. So our focus always has been, and that's sort of came down from the county board. They would like to see the focus of trying to get the border system completed and moving forward. So that's been a priority, like I said, for 20 plus years. So that's why, you know, we're doing that. I know Parks has partnered in some situations with other municipalities, sometimes the Road Commission, sometimes the cities on combination. But for the most part, we're trying to get a network that's sort of off the road system versus a paved system. So that's, I think, that's where Parks is currently with that. You know, it's like I said, a lot of it was directive coming down from the Board of Commissioners. That's where they like to see Parks. And that's sort of been a goal of Parks Commission for 20 plus years, to try to get the border to border done countywide, and the connecting communities that would help connect those two. So I don't know, Cheryl, if you want to chime in. And
Sure. I can just add that there have been some occasions where we have been able to partner with county parks. I can think of a section of Huron River Drive, a section of Plymouth Road, where county parks did pay for paved shoulders to be added onto the road project that was being done, so that we had sort of an on-system facilities that were built at that time. For most of the millage projects, the type of work that we're doing is not really conducive to adding on a paved shoulder. And I think, as you're probably aware, most of the county road, the county roads don't have full 5-foot paved shoulders existing. Certainly if they do, we're happy to, when we're doing a resurfacing, to resurface the bike lanes, and they would be marked and signed accordingly. If we do, on the handful of crush and shape or the pulverizing type projects, we may try to widen it out a little bit. But to do a full bike lane becomes a very expensive and extensive project, which is typically beyond the scope of work that we've programmed for the millage, because the millage dollars we really are using to preserve our existing system. But if the opportunities present themselves, we're absolutely more than happy to do that.
Thank you for the question. Is there anybody else that would like to virtually raise their hand? You guys got an applause from Marta on that. Thank you, Marta.
Yes, thank you.
At this point, I don't see any other raised hands or any questions in the chat feature. Cheryl, if you'll just go to the next slide, just as a reminder, as Cheryl mentioned, we have a ton of information out there to help voters learn about this millage before the August 4th ballot, or for the August 4th election. And you can visit this link on the Road Commission's website. That's just a short link to it. Whereas Cheryl mentioned, there's an interactive project map if you're interested in exactly which projects would be completed on the roads or non-motorized if this millage is renewed. There's also our phone number. You're welcome to call the Road Commission or Parks Department. And then we also are sharing a lot of information on our social media pages. It does look like Marta has a question. So Marta, I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question.
I just wanted to follow up on the question about bike paths along existing roads. And I think probably probably Roy at least remembers in Northfield Township when we were having a program of every time a paved road was improved in any way or repaved, that they were adding another 4 feet, was it, of shoulder, so that we had an 8-foot shoulder instead of a 4-foot shoulder. I'm not sure if my numbers are right, but an extra wide shoulder along the paved roads, which didn't require any sort of, huge amount of extra money. And that was very successful. I don't know if you're still doing that or not, but I would encourage you to think about that as an alternative. If you find a major road like Whitmore Lake Road, North Territorial Road, there are people on bicycles riding on those roads all the time. And it's really dangerous. And if the shoulders were just somewhat wider, it would make a really big difference in public safety.
Oh, I can respond first, and I'll let Cheryl. You are correct. And I think Cheryl sort of touched on this, but I'll touch on it. I know, like when we did the East Shore project on the south side of Whitmore Lake, we tried to widen that, and we were able to put probably some areas 4-foot shoulders, some areas 3-foot shoulders. So when we're able to do that, and I say we, obviously when I worked at Washtenaw County Road Commission, that's what we were able to do. And same thing when we did Whitmore Lake Road through Main Street. We tried to squeeze, tried to widen it out as much as you can. North Territorial is pretty challenging because for the most part we have 2-foot shoulders, sometimes 1-foot shoulders, and then ditches and then trees. So it's really, a road like that is really challenging. And for the most part, we really haven't reconstructed and tried to widen North Territorial. But there are roads, yeah, when we're out there and if it's opportunity, we'll take advantage of it. And like I said, Parks has partnered with, sometimes with the Road Commission to do projects and add those bike lanes. And sometimes I know in Ypsilanti, 2 years ago, there's a section of North Harris. It was a connecting communities type project with urban money and it ended up being a complete street with sidewalks and bike lanes. So it's sometimes, I mean, it's sort of a mix of fixes depending on, where the community is on different things. So, and sometimes it'd be actually an excellent connecting communities grant potentially. If you're saying, okay, let's try to put a bike lane along blank road because there's a road project coming up in, an out year. I think Parks would be open to partnering with the Road Commission because obviously there's a lot of projects we have already partnered with. And if there's opportunity, a road's being rebuilt and it could be bike lanes added, I think Parks would look positive, and so would the Road Commission if it really wouldn't be that much additional cost. So with that, I'll turn it over to Cheryl and she can, update from the Road Commission's perspective.
Yeah, no, just building on what you were saying, Roy, and we agree, Marta. If the opportunity is there for us to be able to do it, we're happy to do it. That's true regardless of the funding source. A lot of the millage projects that we have are pretty simple resurfacing. A lot of them are pretty traditional 2-lane county roads. But if we have the opportunity, Dexter and Arbor Road, we did a couple of years ago from the city of Dexter to Zeeb, that already had a wider footprint. So we were able to do the paved shoulders for the bike lanes along. That actually happened to be a federal dollars we used for that, but the opportunity was there. So we certainly took advantage of it. Other projects, I know we did a section of Pittsfield or Platte Road down in Pittsfield Township. When we did a full crush and shape, we were not able to get a full 5-foot bike lane on each side, but because of the type of work we were doing, we were able to at least widen it out a little bit, and at least it made it better. It didn't make it ideal, and we recognize that, but we made it better because we put, I think, about a 3-foot paved shoulder on there at that point in time. So if the opportunity is there, we are more than happy to do it where we can.
Yeah, they're out there on their bikes anyway, whether or not the shoulders are wider. And particularly
Agreed.
North Territorial, Pontiac Trail, and Whitmore Lake Road are the ones that I'm most familiar with. And there are, particularly on the weekends before COVID anyway, there were squads of, bicyclists, and it is really dangerous because the speeds on those roads tend to be higher than they are on some of the less traveled roads.
Agreed. Yes, anything that we can do in those areas. I'm a frequent traveler of Scio Church Road, which is another heavily used bike route, pretty narrow, limited visibility at times. So yes, completely understand that it's challenging at times to share the roads.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Marta. Is there anybody else that has a question about the roads and non-motorized millage? You can virtually raise your hand by clicking the participants button at the bottom of your screen and then the raise hand button, or by dialing *9. Or you can ask a question in the chat of this meeting. So at this time, we don't have any more hands raised. Again, we've got a lot of information on our website. We'd encourage you to check that out. We will post the recording of this meeting to our website probably tomorrow morning. If you know people who are not able to join us, they can watch it and then reach out to us with additional questions. But Cheryl, Roy, is there anything else you'd like to add before we end the meeting?
No, I just thank you very much for dedicating part of your evening to this. And please, if you know of anybody else that is interested, point them to our website, whether they want to watch the recording or just look at the information that's there. We're more than happy to share that.
Yep, same with me. Just thanks for listening in. And if you have any questions, contact Parks. So we're more than happy to answer any of your questions. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.